Millersville. I'd like to welcome you to the session on LGBTQIA Equality. We have wonderful speakers today whom I'm not going to introduce, someone else will, but I want to just give you a couple of general notes before we get started. Again, thank you all for being here. I think this is a wonderful session, and if you see me ducking out, it's not because of lack of interest. I actually have to go find Representative Sims, who is, I think, lurking around campus somewhere, and I'll drag him back. I am, in addition to a faculty member, chair of the President's Commission on Gender and Sexual Diversity, our LGBTQIA issues group, and as well as one of the faculty advisors for our campus allies and director of our Safe Zone program. The Safe Zone program in particular is something that all of you should pay attention to on campus. Look for the signs on faculty and staff doors for a safe place to go if you have any concerns about your gender or sexuality. We can provide resources. We can point you to where to get excellent counseling, or we can just be there and sympathize if that's all you need. So I'm going to turn this over to Colleen Haight, President of Allies, to introduce our first speaker.
Good morning, everybody. As Blaise said, I'm Colleen Haight, President of Allies, government major, hence why I'm here. And I've been given the distinct honor to introduce our two speakers this morning. And our first speaker is Liz Bradbury. Liz is the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Diversity Network, an organization that directly serves the LGBT community of the Greater Lehigh Valley. Pennsylvania Diversity Network has numerous initiatives, including a national award-winning photo project showcasing same-sex couples facing inequality, and the PDN Library Project, which encourages and supports public and school libraries that provide LGBT resources to the community. In addition, Liz Bradbury is also a published author of 2 books, and without further ado, I'll let you take over.
I have to get all my stuff up here. Wait a minute, so I'm all arranged. Hi. Okay. There will be prizes, so pay attention. I was going to say all these really great things about Representative Sims so that he would hear me saying the great things. Now he's not here yet, so I'll have to give him the page that so he can know that I'm going to say that. I'm Liz Bradbury. I'm the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Diversity Network. Our organization, does everybody hear me all right? Because I can talk really loud. Our organization works on a variety of LGBT civil rights issues every day and has done so for 15 years. We provide up-to-date information on our social media pages, so I hope you join the Pennsylvania Diversity Network Facebook page, and on our 24-hour info phone line, and on our website, which is the largest GLBT website for information and referrals in the state of Pennsylvania. We've produced a newspaper for 15 years. We have done dozens of programs. We speak, debate, and serve on panels dealing with LGBT issues, and we work on individual instances of discrimination on a case-by-case basis. I know that Representative Sims is going to speak about some of the very important legislation he's championing here in Pennsylvania. Having an openly gay elected legislator means a great deal to the state. When minority members have a committed a representative in government, especially one as committed as Representative Sims, it's the foundation of the beginning of full equality. Since he's been in office, Representative Sims has carefully monitored every piece of legislation that impacts civil rights and has made sure they were inclusive. Having a representative like Brian Sims in the legislature makes LGBT people like me rest much more easily, and I'm very grateful. If you believe that all people should be treated equally, and you support the laws that require fairness, if you want to be an ally to those who are discriminated against in your own community and globally, then you must not turn away from discrimination. When you're confronted by prejudice and you don't object to it, you not only miss the opportunity to influence others, but you influence yourself. Your own attitudes shift to a more prejudiced direction to justify your actions. If you do not speak out against racism, you internalize racism. You become more racist. If you do not speak out against LGBT discrimination, you become more homophobic. And if you feel uncomfortable when I say this, then it's a signal for you to examine your own prejudice. How many U.S. states have anti-discrimination laws that include sexual orientation? Does anybody know the number? There are prizes.
37.
Nope. Nope.
50.
Nope. 52. 13. No. Okay. It's not those numbers, so you didn't win the prizes. It's 21. 21 states have anti-discrimination statewide laws that include sexual orientation. There are no state laws in 29 states that explicitly prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation. And in 33 states, there are no state laws prohibiting discrimination based on gender identity. Whenever I speak to a group of people, I always mention that sexual orientation and gender identity are not included in the protected classes in civil rights laws at the federal or Pennsylvania state level. Those are the laws that ban discrimination in employment, housing, or public accommodation. Some people will counter by saying, but Pennsylvania is an at-will state, and that means you can be fired for any reason. But that's not true, and there's Representative Sims. I just said all the stuff about how great he was, and then he missed that. Okay, I'll tell him later. But anyway, some people counter by saying that Pennsylvania is an at-will state, and that means that you can be fired for any reason, but that's not true. What are some things that you cannot be fired for in Pennsylvania? Prizes. There's prizes. Race, right. Okay, now here we go. Let me see if I can throw this. I used to throw Mardi Gras beads, but they didn't seem, like globally friendly. So now this is chocolate that is ethically traded. So how about that? Let's see if I can get that. Oh, it's in a package, so if it isn't. Somebody else had another thing. Somebody said age. Age isn't exactly right because it's age over 40. You have to be over 40. So if you're 39 and a half, you're screwed in the state of Pennsylvania. Religion is one of them. There you go. Ethnic origin. Under Pennsylvania law, it is illegal to fire someone because they are African American, but it is legal to fire them because they are transgender. It is illegal to deny someone housing because they are Latino, but it's legal to deny them housing because they are gay. It is illegal to deny someone entrance to a restaurant because they are disabled, but it is legal to deny them access to the restaurant if they are LGBT. If you are discriminated against in Pennsylvania because of race or ethnicity or sex or disability or age over 40, or several other classes, you can file a case with the State Human Relations Commission, which has paid investigators who will investigate your case for free. But you cannot file with them on cases of discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity because those classes are not in the Pennsylvania law. There is no federal law, there is no state law, but in Pennsylvania, we have 33 municipalities which have fully inclusive anti-discrimination ordinances which cover about a third of the people in the state. See the Pennsylvania Diversity Network website in the Civil Rights section for a full list. The town of Millersville is not on it. When communities do not have a law that protects employees and customers from discrimination, then we can sometimes fall back on inclusive corporate policies. While the city of Wilkes-Barre does not have a law, at least employers like Wilkes University have a non-discrimination policy that includes sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. So how about where you are right now in Millersville University? What does your policy say? Does it include sexual orientation and gender identity? Prizes. You're right. Right. Millersville has no policy that protects employees or students from discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, I might be wrong about that, but I spent hours going through the Millersville websites and handbooks online, and the list of protected classes does not include sexual orientation or gender identity. At Millersville, you can be fired for being gay or discriminated against as an LGBT student. Other Pennsylvania state systems for higher education colleges, for example, California University of Pennsylvania, which is part of the PASHE system, have a strongly written policy that says they do not discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity. East Stroudsburg and Bloomsburg universities have weaker statements of support, but they do include sexual orientation and gender identity and equality statements. Millersville has nothing. Now, I know this is because the conservative chancellors of higher education system in Harrisburg have said that they will not allow PASHE schools to have these statements. But other institutions in the system have rebelled against that discriminatory position and taken a public stance of inclusion. But Millersville has not. It has gone along with the chancellors. If Millersville University were a person, it would be one of those kids who stood by as the bully beat up the gay kid. It would be one of those people in Germany in the 1940s who said, "I was just following orders." A statewide Pennsylvania non-discrimination law that is fully inclusive of sexual orientation and gender identity has been stalled in Harrisburg for 12 years. Of course, that was all before Representative Sims was in office. He might be one of the ones who fixes that. But I believe that passing marriage equality is the ultimate key to opening the doors to full GLBT civil rights laws, and here's why. Employment discrimination against gay people, especially fairly powerful gay men and lesbians like doctors and lawyers and administrators and deans and college professors and CEOs, doesn't really happen that much anymore. Yes, discrimination happens to workers in lower-level jobs, especially transgender people in hourly wage jobs, and those people who do not have that kind of powerful voice that can make change. But employment discrimination does not happen every day to every LGBT worker, and even when a person experiences job discrimination, they can move to another job. Unfortunately, some LGBT people who would have the strongest voices against discrimination, the college administrators, the lawyers, the corporate officers, the politicians, have never spoken out to fight discrimination because they really didn't get anything for it. To those people, the risks outweighed the perks when it came to fighting for employment non-discrimination, to fighting employment discrimination. And frankly, employment discrimination for people like these higher-paid professionals has become relatively rare, especially if they kept a low profile. But here's the one big difference between employment discrimination and marriage equality discrimination. Before the fall of Section 3 of DOMA, discrimination based on marriage equality happened to every committed same-sex couple every day. Even after the passage of marriage equality in the 13 states, Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, Iowa, New York, New Hampshire, California, Maine, Rhode Island, Maryland, Delaware, Minnesota, Washington State, and the District of Columbia, where same-sex couples who married in those states got the hundreds of their states' rights granted, those couples were still not able to access the 1,138 federal rights granted to all opposite-sex legally married couples. The lack of these rights affected every same-sex couple. Taxes, inheritance rights, immigration, military benefits, healthcare benefits, Social Security, even the right to arrange the funeral of your deceased spouse, the rights that opposite-sex married couples take for granted were denied same-sex couples every single day. My partner of 25 and a half years, Patricia, who's in the back, and I traveled from our home in Allentown, Pennsylvania to Darien, Connecticut to get legally married in 2009. Because Darien is the closest place to Pennsylvania where same-sex couples can get married the moment they get their license. There's no waiting period there. Yet, though we were legally married, Pennsylvania did not recognize it, so we didn't get to the 600 PA state marriage rights or the 1,138 federal marriage rights. But that all changed. It hugely changed in June as a result of a Supreme Court case that was called Yes, Windsor, and now you get the candy. The Windsor case. The result of the Edie Windsor case, in which the Supreme Court found Section 3 of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, found the Federal Defense of Marriage Act unconstitutional. The federal government announced that couples who are in legal marriages that were celebrated in any marriage equality state would be recognized federally if they lived in marriage equality states, and granted some rights, including military spousal benefits, immigration, ERISA-regulated pension, federal inheritance tax, to everyone, regardless of where they lived. The federal workers' recognition was huge. Post office workers, anyone in a federal courthouse office, civilian military workers were suddenly entitled to full benefits if they were legally married. But up until this decision, any same-sex couple getting benefits through their partner had to pay federal tax on the benefits as imputed income added to their spouse's salary. Now, no married couple has to pay that tax, no matter where they live. Patricia and I have been paying that tax on the benefits that I received from her job in New York State for 15 years. And now we don't have to pay that federal tax anymore as a result of the Edie Windsor case. Every single couple, Senator Barney Frank and Jim Reedy, TV star Jesse Tyler Ferguson and Justin Makita, Ellen DeGeneres and Porson DeRossi, even though these people are very rich, they were still hugely affected by the lack of federal marriage equality recognition every single day until now. Let me make this completely clear. These rights absolutely are not extended to couples who are not legally married, but any couple can go to a marriage equality state and get married. Civil unions bring no federal rights and never will. The civil union train has left the station. It is simply no longer an option. No same-sex couple today should get a civil union. If a couple lives in a civil union state like New Jersey, they should go to a marriage equality state and get married, and their marriage will be recognized as a civil union if they live in a civil union state and as a marriage by the U.S. federal government. I just want to add, on a further level, that civil union has never been a relationship equal to marriage. And as a good way to illustrate that, if two people are civil unioned, they may get state rights, but no federal rights. But they will miss out on the societal recognition that marriage always gets. Most people really have no idea what a civil union is. Everyone knows what a marriage is. Everyone understands the relationships a marriage creates. Civil unions really do not create anything but the civil union. Even though Trish and I were the first couple from Pennsylvania to get a civil union in 2000, we were legally married in Connecticut in 2009, and when we were, my sister, who lives in Connecticut, said, "Now I have a sister-in-law." And she was absolutely correct, because based on the marriage law of Connecticut, she now had a sister-in-law in Trish. Trish has a niece and nephew, both of whom happen to be older than she is. And we just saw them on a recent vacation, and I explained to them that since I am married to their aunt, I am their aunt as well. They were my niece and nephew now. When my sister had to be in a hospital room with family only, her sister-in-law, Trish, was allowed admittance. Civil unions do not create those relationships. So, what does this change in marriage equality mean? Suddenly, all gay people in relationships have a reason to make a public move to declare themselves gay. If they declare their relationships by getting married, they will get major rights, major family protections, major security. These things are very hard to forego. But how does that affect job discrimination? Just because a gay person is married doesn't mean they won't be fired from their job for being gay. Right, that's exactly right. So now these people, the college administrators, the political aides, the corporate bigwigs, the doctors, the lawyers, who have been so comfortable to not stand up, to keep a low profile because it didn't matter, finds that it does matter now. And they will get married. And we're already seeing couples who implied they would never marry doing it because people have to marry because they cannot afford to lose these rights. If they work in Washington for a conservative congressman, and there are a lot of gay people who do, they get full federal spousal health and pension benefits for their spouse and will be able to avoid the crippling state tax if one of them dies. But they have to be married and declare that they are married when they file for benefits. And then these more powerful people will be discriminated against, or at least they will be at significant risk for discrimination and a totally different position regarding their own rights. Those with the strongest voices will have to stand up because now they will have something significant to lose. The federal government has declared that legally married same-sex military spouses are eligible for full benefits. 15% of military personnel are female. And some information indicates that nearly half of them are lesbians. Under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was illegal for gay military people to marry because that was telling. But it's now not only not illegal, but gay and lesbian soldiers can now get benefits to protect their families. Far more lesbian and gay people will join up and will marry. Backlash always occurs when minorities get rights. It's happening now. The conservative states of Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, and Oklahoma have announced they will refuse to give spousal benefits to the legally married gay and lesbian soldiers in their state National Guards, even though 90% of the money for the state National Guard comes from the federal government. There is no other reason for these states to refuse these benefits other than blatant discrimination. It certainly doesn't support the troops. Pennsylvania is not a marriage equality state, and though it tends to be a blue state, the Republican redistricting, which has been called the most partisan districting in the U.S., with districts the shape of writhing octopus tentacles, makes the fair election of balanced representatives very hard. So the adoption of federal marriage equality laws legislatively is not going to be easy. However, the American Civil Liberties Union has filed an excellent lawsuit against the state with 23 diverse plaintiffs demanding equal marriage rights for same-sex couples in a challenge against the state of Pennsylvania's State Defense of Marriage Act. The ACLU has actually filed 3 other similar suits in other states, so there are a total of 4 state lawsuits, ACLU lawsuits in the United States, any one of which, when won, could bring, and will probably bring, not only full marriage equality to Pennsylvania, but in the fashion of Loving versus the Virginia case, equality in every U.S. state, bringing about the demise of the rest of DOMA. I've read the 55-page ACLU filing, and one part that is especially interesting is that the case makes full use of the fact that Pennsylvania is the only U.S. state that has no legal recognition of same-sex relationships, but allows for second-parent adoption by same-sex couples. In 2002, the PA State Supreme Court found, without question, that same-sex parents could jointly adopt children because it was in the best interest for the children. That decision, that legal decision in Pennsylvania, allowing for second-parent adoption, nullifies the weak legal defense against same-sex marriage that anti-GLBT organizations use, that having legal same-sex parents would be bad for children because children in Pennsylvania had legal same-sex parents for 11 years. At this time, 27 countries have marriage equality, and every legally married same-sex couple in the United States is reciprocally recognized by these countries. As each new country and each new U.S. state recognizes marriage equality, those who are already married in a marriage state are recognized there. People who are already married do not have to get married again as their own state adopts marriage equality. Internationally, countries that have state religions that are traditionally anti-gay marriage adopted full marriage equality. The Catholic countries of France and Spain are good examples. This is because of the clear separation between church marriage that brings religious recognition and state marriage that brings couples legal rights. As people are more and more positive about marriage equality in the U.S., the opponents of marriage equality find they have to lie to get people to see marriage equality negatively. These include that churches will have to marry gay couples, which is a lie. That businesses will have to serve gay people, which has nothing to do with marriage equality laws. That it will somehow lead to marrying goats. Why is it always goats? Why is it always goats? And that children will be told that their male or female parents are unnecessary. The big fear of anti-LGBT people about marriage equality is what happened in Spain. It adopted marriage about 8 years ago, and now the population of Spain is the most tolerant of marriage equality among European nations. Ultimately, the most anti-gay people are those who are fearing their own same-sex attraction. When an opponent of GLBT rights says that all gay people are child abusers, or as Pat Robertson recently said, that all gay men want to infect people with AIDS, the motivation becomes fairly clear. Internalized homophobia makes people desperate to prove they are not gay to themselves. For them, being a person who simply has same-sex attraction cannot be the only definition of a gay person, because that is what they feel. They call GLBT people serial killers or child abusers because they are not themselves serial killers or child abusers, so therefore they are not gay. Internationally, there are about 88 countries that criminalize gay sex and about 270 that do not. In Uganda, there is a piece of legislation known as the Kill the Gays Bill. U.S. legislators and far-right religious leaders have actually worked with countries that need scapegoats for their outbreaks of AIDS or corruption or violence or economic disaster, and they've worked on bills such as these. The Kill the Gays Bill not only calls for the death penalty of gay men, but if passed, the bill will require anyone who is aware of an offense or an offender to report the offender within 24 hours. If an individual does not do so, he or she is considered an offender and is liable to conviction, to a fine or imprisonment up to 3 years. Abiding Truth Ministries founder Scott Lively of California sparked international outrage when he worked with anti-gay forces in Uganda to foster this legislation. While the future of this bill is still up in the air, a Ugandan LGBT group is suing Lively for crimes against humanity in a Massachusetts federal court. Many countries, including the U.S., have expressed public outrage at this heinous Uganda law. But is expressing outrage enough? Is talking about something enough, or even praying about it enough? When we turn our backs on discrimination, when we dismiss the issues that are happening to someone else, when we do this with any persecution or any disenfranchised group of people, we create injustice. And injustice anywhere is just injustice everywhere. Which brings us to what is happening in Russia now. Russia has a law that effectively makes it illegal to make any positive statement about being gay. As a result, violence against the LGBT community in Russia is becoming rampant. The Olympics in Russia have become a focal point of this issue. The anti-gay law has created a situation that requires everyone to pick a side. Some have said that making a public issue of the hate-based laws in Russia is causing violence to gay people there and is something the West should stay out of. I disagree. The responsibility of global citizens is to speak out and refuse to comply with racism, unfairness, inequality, sexism, classism, transphobia, hate, homophobia, and religious prejudice. Excusing any of these things by suggesting that it is a custom or tradition of a society to allow intolerant bias is respecting ignorance and bigotry. While every person has a right to have an opinion, no one should presume that opinions born of prejudice, ignorance, or hate are worthy of respect. In 1936, the Olympics were held where? Who said that first? Somebody back there. Oh, yeah, good for you. Okay, well, let's see if I can get you now. Oh, get it low. There you go. Very good. Berlin. I'm coming up on another one, so get ready. The most successful athlete in the games with 4 gold medals. Oh, wait a minute. I'll step back. I went ahead too much. Yes, it was in Berlin, in Nazi Germany. The world had a choice to attend and stand up for fairness and equality, proving that diversity was stronger than the master race policy of the Nazi Aryan nation. The most successful athlete at the games with 4 golds was African-American runner. Who said it? I insulted your college. Now I can give you the chocolate. Okay, that's good. So Jesse Owens. Yes, Jesse Owen. When he won, the American team cheered, and Adolf Hitler refused to shake Owens' hand because he was a minority. Did that lead to war? Or was it at a time when the lines were already drawn and called for the world to take sides? This year, some of our Olympic athletes will go to the Olympics and stand up for what is right, and we will cheer them, not just for their skills, but for their bravery. Some of the gay Olympic athletes will refuse to participate, and we will cheer them for their sacrifice because they are refusing to be part of something they cannot support. But some will go and not speak out, and they may win their races, but they will have failed in their responsibilities as global citizens. If you aren't going to the Olympics, you can still do your part at home. Strive to understand the backlash that's occurring against the pro-transgender youth law just passed in California. The law simply says that gender is self-determined, and schools should deal with transgender youth with that in mind. If you cannot understand how a young person can identify their own gender, then instead of arguing your point of view, realize that you are not speaking from a position of personal knowledge. If you are not transgender, then you do not know what it is to be transgender. If your opinion is based on your own discomfort, or what you perceive to be the discomfort of others, then you are using the same foundation of ignorance that is the basis for every discriminatory, racist, intolerant, hate-based opinion or policy that has ever come to be. I want you to consider this one last point. The Boy Scouts of America, I heard a grunt, and has a policy of discrimination that is the most draconian and hate-based of any national secular organization in the United States. And remember, this does not include the Girl Scouts of the USA. That's a separate organization, and their policy is fine. The BSA's policy is not just a policy that does not prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation, it requires anti-LGBT discrimination. Local troops must fire parents of Cub Scouts who are serving as troop leaders solely because they are lesbians. All GLBT employees are refused employment as a matter of policy. There is no other organization that functions in every town, in schools, in community centers, that draws money from local United Ways, that serves youth, that requires adherence to a hate-based policy of discrimination that exists for the sole perpetuation of bigotry. And yet, our communities, our school systems, our local funding sources, even our progressive politicians continue to support the Boy Scouts every day. While Millersville University would have been the kid standing by watching the bully beat up the gay kid, the Boy Scouts of America, with its blatant policy of discrimination, is the bully, kicking the kid when he's down. In the 1940s, the Boy Scouts of America would have been that Nazi youth Rolf who blew the whistle and dimed out the Von Trapp family in The Sound of Music. If you don't believe, if you don't speak out against discrimination, I thought so. Didn't you just hate that guy? I mean, you know. And he had a choice, too. I mean, that's really what it's about. If you don't speak out against discrimination against the GLBT population, you will become more prejudiced in order to justify your actions. Think, examine your actions, and take a stand. Thank you very much. Yay. Let me take your picture. I just want to take a quick picture. Let me get a little...
questions until after Brian speaks, and then there will be time for doing that. I want to say hello, Brian.
Okay. Clear up all my stuff.
Colleen, you want to introduce Brian?
Oh, yeah, come on up.
All right. Hi again, everybody. So our next speaker is Brian Sims, and Brian Sims is the first openly gay individual that has been elected to the Pennsylvania Assembly. However, his activism began much earlier. While attending Bloomsburg University, Representative Sims was co-captain of the football team and came out publicly, becoming the only openly gay college football captain in NCAA history. Representative Sims has also served as the president of Equality Pennsylvania and as the chairman of the Gay and Lesbian Lawyers of Philadelphia. So, without further ado, Representative Sims.
Thank you for that. I somehow always wish my mom was in the room when I heard my bio read aloud. And I am, I think, the strongest legislator in Pennsylvania. I don't know that to be true. There was a guy named Josh Shapiro from Montgomery County and a guy named Mike Gerber who both left their jobs last year, who I think were in a lot better shape than I am. But what's left is not all that great a pool, so I am probably the strongest legislator in PA. I have no candy to throw out at any of you, no chocolate. I'm going to Shady Maple later on with my chief of staff, if anybody's so inclined, and you can skip class. I'm sorry that I'm running late. As you heard, I represent Center City, Philadelphia, and I left this morning at about 6:45 to get on the road to come out here. This is certainly not my first trip to Millersville. I played a couple of football games here in college, and I have spoken here on LGBT civil rights once before, so I'm really excited to be back. And it's with a very different message, so to speak, than when I was here last. Normally when I get a chance to talk to universities about and businesses about is sort of the state of Pennsylvania's LGBT civil rights movement. And you heard from Liz a great deal about it, and I will talk a little bit more about that. And I used to talk about what the potential was. And there's this great Vince Lombardi quote about potential is interesting, but performance is everything. And Pennsylvania has moved from this potential category to a performance category, very much so in the last maybe 12, 18 months. I was at a meeting just yesterday that is going to see the largest influx of LGBT funding in Pennsylvania history. That is going to be why this civil rights movement is won in Pennsylvania. Right? Yay, right? Wow. Money, who would have thought? I always assume that everybody knows what LGBT means, especially if you've come to a conference or a program about LGBT issues. But as someone who does LGBT civil rights, I find that a lot of people don't know what it means. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Not transgendered. There's no such a word. And I hear gay people say that all the time. It's like saying gayed or lesbianed. And there are days I'm kind of gayed. But transgendered is not a word. It is transgender. When I was at the University of Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, this young woman raised her hand after I had explained that, and she told me how offended she was that I had left her off the spectrum. And I thought, well, shit, I do this for a living. I'm right and you're wrong. And of course, she was right and I was wrong. She says it's LGBTQIA Equality. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer, questioning, intersex, allied, and asexual. Wow, huh? Right? My mom calls us the ABS community. all but straight. Brian, how are the ABSers today? We're fabulous, Mom. We're fabulous. Thank you for asking. My parents are both retired lieutenant colonels in the Army. And it is actually, yeah, right? Somebody said, whoa, I'm 35 years old and my mom could beat the hell out of me. I've come to terms with that. You laugh. If we have time, I'll tell you a story about it later. But it had a lot to do with sort of why I'm in office now. When your parents are both colonels in the Army, you have a sort of inflated sense of Americana, which I do. I grew up all over the United States. My parents were both professors at West Point at the military academy. They were both assigned to the Pentagon at one point or another. And so, you know, I've had a chance to sort of, I think, see all of the United States. I have been to all 50 states. I was living in Alaska. My mom was the commanding officer of the Army base in Alaska when the Exxon Valdez ran ashore. I knew in some way or another that public service was going to be a part of my life. I come from this really long line of very alpha, badass women, mostly Army officers. I was not going to marry one of those the way that my brothers did. No surprises there. Yeah, you'll hear about my extra limp wrists later on. And so for me, when I moved to Pennsylvania, I moved here in 8th grade. And in 8th grade, I was sort of your typical 8th grade fat kid. Don't laugh. I was the exact same height that I am right now, and actually a little bit heavier than I am right now. I was a big guy. I was a big 8th grader. And in Pennsylvania, they make you play football whether you wanted to or not. And I did. And I was lucky enough to go to one of those sort of football breeding factory high schools that also cared about grades. And so I got decent grades and ended up going to Bloomsburg University on a scholarship, on a football scholarship. And are you Husky? We're so much better people than everyone else. I have data in my car to prove it to all of you if you're around later on. And, you know, Bloomsburg, as I describe it to people, it was like second star to the right and straight on till morning. You know, it's like in the middle of Narnia, Pennsylvania. You all can relate, yeah. And Bloomsburg didn't have an LGBTQ group. It didn't have a gay straight alliance. It didn't really have anything, but it had a football program, and I wanted to play there. And I never really intended to come out as a football player, but right after my last game, the national championship, which we lost, yeah, aw. It's the worst defeat in Division II national championship history. And I'm almost over it. And right after the national championship, I was headed to Shippensburg University to visit my twin brother, actually. And I was with some guys on my football team, and they asked me if I was gay. I mean, full on, yo, Sims, are you gay? Just like that, dropped it on me. And, you know, I had never really intended to come out to them, but I knew it was a good time, and I did, and I came out to my college football team, which sort of spread to the rest of my college, and it went fine. And I didn't really think much of the experience other than being very proud of it, being very proud of my teammates, and I went off to law school. I had taken my LSAT when I was 16 years old. I knew I was going to be a lawyer my whole life. I knew I wanted to be a women's rights attorney, a civil rights attorney. When your mom's a colonel in the Army, you're a feminist whether you want to be or not. And I was. It was something my I don't know what kind of a pretentious little 14-year-old I must have been, but if you'd asked me at 14 what I wanted to do, I was going to say, I'm going to be a civil rights attorney, and I'm going to get women equal pay. I didn't know who Lily Ledbetter was at the time, but I sure as hell know now. And you know, so I went off to law school. I moved back to Pennsylvania right afterward, and I was a disability attorney in Pennsylvania for a number of years when something happened to me that fundamentally changed the course of my career, and it is something that I'm now very, very engaged in, and I'm going to see one here in the next couple of years. A friend of mine named Dan Anders decided he was going to run for judge. 2 years earlier, we had elected the first ever out person to a statewide office, and a woman named Ann Bouchard. She had run for the Court of Common Pleas. She was a lawyer in Philadelphia, had gone to Temple Night School, and she became, in 2007, the first ever statewide elected official who was out. And 2 years later, Dan Anders ran to become the first man ever elected to a statewide position. And he asked me if I would help on his campaign, and I did. And we ended up raising more money than any other challenger or any other judicial candidate in history. And a couple of weeks, actually, before the election, at the time, Ed Rendell, the governor, appointed Dan to fill the position. And what happened is this guy who had been, for the most part, in Philadelphia, one of the most politically active LGBT people, became a judge, and it utterly neutered him politically. I've said this to him. It was in my experience, it was one of the worst things that had happened to Philadelphia's LGBT sort of movement in a while, because he was no longer able to engage in any of the work that he had been doing. And when he became a judge, he asked a number of us to sort of fill in the ranks, fill in the roles. And I began to do so for a number of the organizations that he was involved in. And it was right about this time that I actually met Liz and I met Blaze when I was working with Equality Pennsylvania, that I joined an organization called the National Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund. And what the Victory Fund does is it finds, it funds, and it trains LGBT people to run for office, any office, from school board to Senate. The idea being twofold, not just that representative democracy is important and for all the good, high-minded reasons we should have, LGBT people in elected office, but also because of the metrics. We learned that when you elect out people, it has a very palpable impact on the body that they're elected to, and that the byproduct of electing diverse people to electoral bodies is diversity. No surprises there. What was a surprise to me was Pennsylvania. I don't think I really, truly realized how bad Pennsylvania was when it came to LGBT civil rights. You heard Liz say earlier, Pennsylvania doesn't have a single LGBT civil right statewide. We have second parent adoption in case law in 2002, but we have no other statewide LGBT civil rights. Was Bristol the 33rd? 33rd township that just passed theirs. We have more municipalities that have non-discrimination clauses than any state in the country, but it's a bit of a red herring. Every other state, by the time they've gotten this level of critical mass, has passed a statewide non-discrimination clause. So I knew that Pennsylvania had never elected somebody who was out to the state legislature, and there was a woman in Montgomery County named Fern Kaufman that had run twice. She was a pharmacist, a doctor, and she would have been an incredible first out member of our state legislature. I'll talk about this in a moment, but the first out part is really, really, really important. The Pennsylvania legislature has had gay people in it from the get-go, from the beginning, from the time it was founded. No surprises, there's way too much like marble and gilding in the Capitol for it to have been all straight people, right? The Capitol looks like Liberace's bathroom. Yeah. But the out part really does matter. Statistically, closeted legislators are bad for civil rights. Liz talked about that, that's trying to overcome their internalized homophobia. Well, the American Psychological Association agrees, and they have this list of 5 criteria that they give to therapists to help them determine if their young clients are dealing with being gay themselves. And number 3 on that list is vehement homophobia. I love saying it, vehement homophobia. You know those people that are so crazy anti-gay that they are clearly gay themselves, but we kind of don't want them, right? There was a lot of that I felt in the Capitol. So I tried my darndest to help this woman in Montgomery County win, and she lost. And she lost by a very small margin. And so I decided about 2 years ago now that I was going to run. Sat down with my close friends. I'm going to assume that you all have to go to class, and it's not because I'm extra boring. It's all right. I'm holding it against you. And I decided to run. And I actually ended up running against the longest serving incumbent in the Pennsylvania House to end up losing her position to a challenge. And she was a staunch advocate of LGBT civil rights. It's something I'm very comfortable telling crowds of people. I did not go after and beat one of these crazies that I now do battle with. I did run against another Democrat, a long-serving Democrat, a Democrat who had probably been supportive of LGBT civil rights longer than I've been alive. No kidding. I was 6 years old, though, when she was elected, and I didn't feel like, in the sort of modern era of Pennsylvania politics, that enough was being done for LGBT issues and for progressive issues. And I knew that no matter how strong an ally can be, that there is no substitute for actually being there yourself. Barney Frank has this great line that says, unless you have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And gay people had been on the menu in Pennsylvania. So I ran, I announced on September 8th of 2011. My election was April of 2012, and I remember telling the incumbent that I was going to run the largest, cleanest, healthiest race in the history of our district, and I was going to win because of it, and I did. And I won by 233 votes, just outside of the margin. And as you heard, I became the first openly LGBT person ever elected to the state legislature. But about 6 hours after I started my duties, which actually technically began at midnight on December 1st, a Republican member of the Pennsylvania legislature came out, a guy named Mike Fleck, He's a little bit older than I am. He'd been in the legislature for obviously longer than I have been. But Mike became, I believe, the first Republican in the country, first Republican legislator in the country to come out and to serve openly gay who wasn't forced out. He wasn't outed by anybody. And there's a big difference between pressure and duress. And I think a lot of people in his life were telling him, hey, you can do this now. Now's the time. So Pennsylvania went from being the second largest state in the country that had never elected anybody openly LGBT to having now 2 gay people in the legislature who were out and in each caucus. And it actually has made an incredible difference, I believe. Last year, we launched something called the LGBT Equality Caucus in the State House. And it was, as it sounds, it's every legislator of the 203 members of the House that are interested in LGBT issues. Last year, it had 27 members. This year, it has 62. Specifically with regard to HB 300, that's the non-discrimination bill. There is in the panoply of LGBT civil rights, I consider non-discrimination, which is freedom from discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations, hate crimes, anti-bullying, and marriage equality, for me, make up the package of civil rights. There are other things, I mean, there are other, I guess, issues in there for sure, but if we could pass those bills, the non-discrimination bill, the marriage equality bill that I'm about to introduce formally in a couple of days, actually, but we introduced a few months ago. House Bill 156, which is the anti-bullying bill. I don't know the number on the hate crimes bill. If we were able to get these things passed in Pennsylvania, all of a sudden Pennsylvania stops being this enigma. It stops being this island in the Northeast. Every single state we touch, except for Ohio and West Virginia, does a better job of protecting its LGBT citizens. And I'm so sick of hearing people say, wow, Pennsylvania's the only state like in the Northeast that doesn't allow marriage equality, right? And I go, whoa, 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 marriage equality, we don't even protect in the most basic ways. The most insidious types of discrimination are still legal. One of the things I tell my colleagues all the time is I'm a sitting state representative. A sitting state representative. I represent the wealthiest district in Pennsylvania history, the most formally educated district in Pennsylvania history. I represent the district in Pennsylvania that puts the most money into this state and has for all time. And yet in about 70% of Pennsylvania, I can get kicked out of a diner for being gay, right? Listen, some days I sweat glitter and smell like lavender. And if I walked into a diner back in Narnia, Pennsylvania, they can kick me out for it. That's insane to me, and it's insane to my colleagues. And so, you know, when I started this, I used to hear all the time, it's a cloudy, gray skies in Harrisburg. We have a Republican House, we have a Republican Senate, we have a Republican governor. And I used to think that that was true. And I now can tell you that the path to equality in Pennsylvania is clearer than it has ever been before. And it's not just because we're looking at some good Democratic gubernatorial candidates and whatnot. I have to say to my colleagues all the time, if one party has the market cornered on equality, we're never going to have it. Equality is not just a Democratic thing, and we have got to stop pretending that it is. I'm a staunch progressive Democrat, very, very, very proud of it. We have led the charge on equality on every issue in American history. But we win when we allow other people to get involved. And we're finally reaching this point, I think, in Pennsylvania, where Republican legislators feel like they can support these issues. It used to be that every Sunday at about 2 o'clock, the 203 members of the State House would get swamped with emails and letters. And it's the stuff that people sign as they're walking out of church. You know, they go to their ceremony and then they sign that little letter that just says, hate gays somewhere. You know, keep on going. You know, I don't think women should be allowed to do anything. That kind of thing. And then we get them in like bulk on Monday morning. That's not happening as much anymore. And, you know, just to look at the co-sponsorships of the bills that we have out there, there are Republicans that are getting on these bills. And that is critically, critically important. Not just because Mike Fleck came out of the closet, not just because I got elected. Because Republicans, I think, in the 2012 election finally realized that being anti-gay is no longer the wedge issue that it used to be. For whatever you can say about the Republican Party in Pennsylvania, it has been very, very good at learning how to draw lines and districts that will sustain it, learning how to take issues that will get its candidates elected and stay in power. And LGBT issues used to be one of those things where if you were anti-gay in your issues, it got you a majority. It got you that coveted 50.1%, which is all you needed. And I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think being anti-gay gets you majorities anymore. So I don't expect that the haters in the State House are going to hate gay people any less. What I expect is the vast majority of the Republicans in the state house who don't hate gay people, who have gay family members, just like all of us, who have gay coworkers, I expect that they feel less compelled to toe the party line. They feel less afraid of veering away from what has been one of the pillars of modern republicanism, which is to hate gay people. One other thing that I'm starting to see that scares me a little bit is the opponents separating women's rights from LGBT civil rights. These things used to all be lumped together. Racial and ethnic justice, LGBT civil rights, women's rights, reproductive rights. And you know, when you were trying to show how conservative or how liberal you were as a legislator, you looked at those four issues to see how somebody voted. In the last couple of months, what I'm seeing in the House is people start to separate how they vote on women's issues and reproductive rights issues from gay civil rights issues. Now, as a gay civil rights advocate, some of that I'm okay with. I think, good, I'm able to convince this person from the middle of nowhere that gay people aren't awful and deserve protections, but they're still voting against women's issues. In April, we had a bill called House Bill 818. House Bill 818 banned private insurance companies in Pennsylvania from offering private insurance company to a woman to have an abortion at her own cost for which she has a constitutional right. I want you to think about that for a second. 36 Democrats voted for it. I was furious. I took to the House floor. There's this great line in politics, and I reminded my colleagues that we put our hands on the Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution. We didn't put our hands on the Constitution and swear to uphold the Bible. It didn't work. That bill passed. And somehow 36 Democrats, some of whom support LGBT civil rights now, thought that it was okay to ban insurance companies from offering private insurance coverage for women. It's a scary thing. And I know that as we continue to talk with my more conservative colleagues about how to help them, with their views on LGBT issues, that I don't want them to turn to these other issues to kind of prove their conservativeness when they need to. So there's still a battle out there. But the path to LGBT civil rights is, in Pennsylvania right now, just simply couldn't be better. There are a lot of lawsuits right now that have been filed. There was another one that was filed yesterday by the Equality Forum on behalf of 32 of the married couples that got marriage licenses in Montgomery County. Obviously, there's the ACLU suit that's out right now. Some of the best lawyers in Pennsylvania are working on these issues right now. Hands down, some of the best lawyers in Pennsylvania. And I get asked a lot when and how it's going to happen, and I don't know. I have no clue if it's going to be the courts first, if it's going to be the federal government first, if it'll be the Supreme Court first, if it'll be my bill. I have a bill, a marriage equality bill, along with Steve McCarter from Montgomery County, and there's a Senate version. I don't know. I don't care. I mean, this is a race, and whoever gets there first, we're all the winner. And so I am more hopeful, I think, than I have ever been in this battle. And there are more opportunities right now for us to see big gains than ever before. We've got them on the run. We have them on the run. The opponents of equality in Pennsylvania, the opponents of equality around the country, know that they are losing. And they are lashing out in some places, and they're not in other places. A year ago, my colleagues by now would have started receiving tons and tons and tons of mail from the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference opposing the bills that I'm working on. I have a bill right now to ban reparative therapy. We have right now, we're hearing a lot about the bathroom issue in LGBT non-discrimination. Well, what about bathrooms, which is an absolute, utter BS red herring argument. But I'm hearing less and less and less of it. They're not as organized against us as they used to be. And I want to end with this. In June, some of you may have heard this or not, but in June, the day of the Supreme Court's DOMA decision, I took to the House floor to talk about it. There is, at the end of each session, an opportunity for us as legislators to address issues that maybe weren't germane to any bills that were presented that day, but we could talk about kind of almost anything you want. And it's called under unanimous consent. And it implies that the room gives unanimous consent for you to speak. So my colleagues, some of them will get up and talk about their 40th anniversary. Some of them will get up and talk about, this is now the year of the puppy and why that's a good thing. And they'll talk about the baseball team in their hometown. It really is a courtesy that we extend to everybody. And I went up to the speaker, the Republican Speaker of the House, Sam Smith, and I said, Mr. Speaker, I would like to speak about today's Supreme Court decisions. And he kind of hemmed and he hawed, and he, all right. all right. And I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm not gonna cast aspersion on anybody. I'm not gonna talk about how far we have to come. I'm not gonna talk about the problems in Pennsylvania or who's causing those problems. I could look at half the room and decide that. So I'm not gonna do any of that. I just, as a civil rights attorney, I wanna talk about how big these decisions were for the country. And he said, okay. And so the way that this works is I go back to my desk, and at some point he calls me up, you know, the gentleman from Philadelphia County, please take the microphone, and I walked over to the mic, and I got maybe 5 words in to speaking about the DOMA decision. I mean, I'd barely introduced myself, and my mic went dead. And what happened is somebody objected to my unanimous consent. Again, we speak in theory at the unanimous consent of everyone in the room. So it only takes, in theory, one person to object to stop a person from talking. It doesn't happen. I wasn't sure if this is something that happens every single day. It doesn't happen. And the person that objected to me was a guy named Daryl Metcalf. Daryl Metcalf. I call him Decaf. It's his drag name. Chairman Metcalf, who's the chair of a committee that I serve on, the State Government Committee, the only committee that I asked to serve on, by the way. Chairman Metcalf is our most notorious Tea Partier. He's a wackadoo. It's not fair to conservatives. It's not fair to Republicans to call him a conservative Republican. They would agree with me. I think he would actually agree with me. He's been going after Corbett all summer long about not being conservative enough. Hating kids enough that you take away $1 billion isn't enough. So he was the person that objected to me. And my colleagues, mostly my Democratic colleagues, were infuriated about it. And they tried to take the mic. And I think some of them were going to try to continue what I was going to say about the decision. Some of them wanted to take the mic to talk about how angry they were that unanimous consent had just been pulled. And the chairman kind of worked his way out the back of the room, and everybody was very angry. And the next morning, the Democrats, we all met as an LGBT caucus to talk about what to do about it. And I said, you know what, we're gonna leave it alone. People are angry. We're going to use that momentum to get them to support House Bill 300. I don't need speeches back. I don't need, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for momentum. And throughout the day, that's what we did. And I think that day we added 12 co-sponsors to the non-discrimination memo in Pennsylvania, which had stalled out. And a number of them were Republicans. But about the middle of that day, Chairman Metcalf did something shockingly stupid. No surprises. He told WHYY that the reason that he had stopped me from speaking is because what I was going to say was against God's law. The clip, the recording, is priceless. It's priceless. And he says a lot of ums in it. And it was something that I had to stop him because I felt like what he was going to say was a violation of God's law. Whew. I tell people all the time, if I'm going to violate God's laws, I'm going to do a much better job of it. And I took to the House floor at the end of the day, and on a different rule, I'm just learning the rules now, there's a different rule that says that if your character essentially has been impugned, you can take to the House floor. And so I did. I walked down to this microphone in front of the speaker, and when this happens, there are 2 people on either side of them that recognize you, and they'll say, Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Philadelphia, and he then calls on me. Well, I sat there at this microphone for about 5 minutes, and he wasn't calling on me. And I was as nervous as could be. I didn't exactly know what I was doing. I don't really understand the rules all that well yet, the Mason's rules of formal procedure. But I knew what he had done was wrong, and I knew I was really ticked off about it. And I was standing at the mic waiting to be called on, and it just wasn't happening. And at one point I turned around and realized that half the Democratic caucus had risen up from their desks on the House floor and shuffled in behind me. Ugh, gives me goosebumps to talk about it. It was a really intense moment for me. And there's a video of it, and in the video I'm very shaky. And part of it is I just didn't know what I was doing. I just knew, I knew how angry I was, how wrong this was. I also knew that people like him, this is the kind of guy, this guy is an old school bully. And unfortunately, sometimes the fastest way to stop that bully is to call them out. Fine, I will see you at 3 o'clock high. And I knew that that's what had to happen with him. I didn't expect the showing of solidarity. And so part of the reason I was so shaky was just knowing that all these people were standing with me, standing behind me. And I asked I explained to the speaker essentially how angry I was, that I thought this was wrong. I read the quote, and he goes, all right, what do you want to do about it? And I didn't have a clue. And I thought, oh, geez. So I asked that he be reprimanded and whatever. And the truth is, the moment itself was reprimand enough. In the days that followed, I was all over MSNBC and CNN, and it has, in many ways, it kickstarted a national opportunity for me to speak about LGBT civil rights because people were so infuriated about it. The emails that followed were the best. I got a lot of, Mr. Chairman, I live in your district, I go to your church, I'm also a Republican, I'm also a conservative, I even think I'm in the Tea Party, and I am nothing like you. The support from Republicans was why this was so important. Getting my party, getting the Democrats in the State House to hate this guy wasn't going to be difficult. He's a schmuck. He is the architect of the four most hateful bills that I know of in Pennsylvania right now. The voter ID bill was his. The anti-gay marriage amendment is his. The ultrasound wand bill, that's his. If you want an abortion, and the Arizona-style anti-immigration bill, that's his. Literally, the four most hateful bills in Pennsylvania right now are his. And he got his when he watched his colleagues walk over to our side of the aisle and apologize to me. And it happened constantly. I still can't walk around anywhere like the Republican part of the House of Representatives without somebody pulling me aside and apologizing to me for what he did. And I was very clear in the press afterward to say this is not a Democrat versus Republican thing. This is the House versus this guy. This is respect and decorum versus the Tea Party. And I didn't lump them with him, and it's helped me a ton. I also hit on him all the time. All the time. You know, the only thing worse than the idea of Daryl Metcalf getting hit on by a man is having to be the man doing it. I make sure I touch him when I talk to him. Just put my hand on his shoulder. You know, Mr. Chairman, that was a great bill you introduced. No, it wasn't. I catch him staring at me a lot. I really do. The moment I was sworn in, standing there, arm up, they read my name aloud, he whipped his head around and looked at me. And I gave him the most like gratuitous over the top, like wink that I could. And you know, there are some people that if you corner them, they lash out and they hurt you. He is not one of those people. He is one of those people that when you corner him and he lashes out, he hurts himself because he says what he actually believes. He says what he's actually thinking. He's unlike a lot of politicians. He doesn't cover up what he says. He doesn't spin what he thinks. He tells you exactly what he thinks. What he thinks is that women are not equal, that gay people are not equal, that racial and ethnic minorities are not equal, that people who are differently abled are not equal. He doesn't respect anybody but the person he sees in the mirror every morning. And it's our job to make sure that people like him sometimes get a microphone and sometimes get shoved out the back door. And I think right now we're doing a really good job of utilizing him and people like him when we can, and utilizing you all and people like you more often than not. So thank you all very, very much for having me. So we definitely...
Hello? Oh, yeah.
We definitely have time for questions. I don't even know what time it is. Oh,
It's about,
we have about 10 minutes for
we've got
questions.
10 minutes. So let's have some fabulous questions.
So assuming Liz and I didn't get it all right the first time, what can we answer for you? We did.
There's candy.
Hey
There's
Liz,
candy.
how was your morning?
The first, there's a question.
Yeah.
Yes, young lady.
This question is for you.
Yes.
Can I have a piece of candy?
Yes.
And also, I'm writing an essay on the anti-gay law in Russia, and I was wondering if I could quote what you said.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you the copy.
Liz had a dead on about the Sochi Olympics. I am a part of what's called the National LGBT Sports Coalition, and we all met at Nike headquarters in July. The woman that runs my Philadelphia office, if any of you are athletes or are interested in LGBT athletes, the woman that runs my Philadelphia office is named Anna Augenis, and she is the national executive director of something called Go Athletes, Generation Out Athletes, which is the national LGBT student athletes organization. And you know, we've spent the better part of the last year working with people like Nike, trying to get them to endorse people like Brittany Griner when she came out, and Jason Collins when he came out. And the Olympics is a really neat opportunity for us. People that were calling for a boycott forgot that we are at our best when we are there. You know, you don't get to have a leathered fist thrust into the air unless you're on top of that podium. And gay people, we know a thing or two about social activism. We know a thing or two about speaking up and speaking out in the right place at the right time. And so we need to be there.
Yeah.
And we win medals
in other
more
words,
than they do.
have Representative Sims quoted in your article as well.
Oh, no, I was going to say, call Anna. In other words, call Anna.
That's good. Anybody else? Come on. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's interesting that one of the arguments about that happened in the Prop 8 trial was that, and this is really in the transcript, they said that the reason that you have to have marriage for opposite-sex couples and not for same-sex couples is because opposite-sex couples are really irresponsible and they have kids all the time, and same-sex couples never have kids by mistake. And so therefore opposite-sex couples have to have marriage to make them responsible. And so and gay people don't need marriage because they're already responsible. And that was actually in the transcript, and it was such an absurd argument. The number of people who are gay doesn't change when marriage equality becomes legal. It just means that their children, and millions of children in the United States are being raised by gay families, get to have married parents, which makes them much more safe. To having two married parents who are eligible for the 1,138 civil rights and the from the federal government and from the state government. In Pennsylvania, it's about 600 state rights for marriage equality, supports children. And Social Security supports children. If people are married, they get have Social Security. If one person dies, they get the Social Security. All that kind of stuff really supports kids. So these kids, and we have this in the state of Pennsylvania, we've had second parent adoption since 2002. So there are families that are raising children and they can't be married. In fact, 60% of the adoption agencies in the state of Pennsylvania allow gay people to adopt children. And yet the laws of the state of Pennsylvania don't allow those children to have married parents. So in terms of people not having a whole bunch of kids, really, again, gay people never have kids by mistake. And so that means that what really happens is that gay families have kids that are much more wanted, and they're much more carefully planned, which is really what I think we all want for families in the United States. So I think that in terms of population growth, because the population of gay people will suddenly balloon up because gay people get to get married. I actually think it will mean more people will have kids who are gay because they'll be able to support their kids more carefully with the laws that will support them. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I don't think I could change that.
Sorry, I don't think that, like, when it comes to population, our problem globally isn't that we're not going to be populated enough. I think there's a problem we're going to be overpopulated. So that argument doesn't really work.
Well, I think,
This is natural evolution.
But it is actually an argument that anti-gay people say all the time. If everybody, this is the illustration of that vehemently anti-gay people believe that if it's not morally wrong to be gay, then everybody will be gay. And what does that tell you?
It's
that
awesome.
They are putting on themselves this moral thing like, I can't be gay because my parents will be upset. If my parents aren't upset, then everybody will be gay. Well, that's only true for gay people. Straight people don't think that. And so obviously these people are gay. And they're just like forcing themselves to think that, if being gay is okay, then everybody would be gay. No, just you would be gay. Everybody else is already there. So what happens is that you have this thing where, like, if you encourage homosexuality, which we don't usually say, but if you encourage the gay lifestyle, then everyone will be gay, and so therefore the entire race will go the way of the dinosaurs, and who were gay, by the way, and then they would that will all die out. Only rampantly internalized homophobic people could possibly believe that would be true, and so I think that's the big illustration there.
Can I ask if our representative, Ryan Ormont, has come up to you and apologized?
So I'm glad that you asked. Ryan is actually somebody I'm pretty close with. I have developed this fun reputation in the Capitol, partially because of what happened with Chairman Metcalf, but mostly because I was doing it beforehand, of being bipartisan. I replaced somebody that was hyper partisan, and so the bar was relatively low, and anything that I did to reach out, no, I mean that in a bad way, but anything that I did to reach across the aisle was going to be seen as a very overt gesture, especially because I have this freakishly progressive liberal district. But you don't pass legislation in Pennsylvania unless Republicans support it, and not every single good idea is a Democratic idea or a Republican idea. And so, for the most part, almost all of my bills that I've introduced this year, I've done with a Republican prime sponsor. How I did it? I got a couple of them drunk. It sounds silly, but there is this thing about sitting across from somebody, sharing a meal, breaking bread, having a drink with somebody. And so, when I first got into office, I hunted down the other legislators that were my age or had similar background. It was the military, sports, or my age, and just started showing up in their offices with a six-pack or showing up at a bar together. And then all of a sudden you'd start to figure out where we had bills in common. So Ryan Aument, his best friend is Brian Cutler in the State House. They both ran each other's races. They're very close. Brian is the chair of the anti-choice or the pro-life caucus. Sorry. Brian is the chair of the pro-life caucus, and yet he and I are about to go on the road. We're going to travel all of Pennsylvania. We both support the merit selection of judges. Judges should not be elected in the state of Pennsylvania. We do a bad job with that, and so we're out. We're going to be out hawking this bill together. They are proof positive that they're not moderate Republicans. I'm not a moderate Democrat, but there is it worked for a long time in American politics that people who disagreed fundamentally ideologically could still get along together. It's in fact what's the basis of our government. So he's been, every time I tell somebody tells me, oh, well, you can't go to them, they're too conservative, or I think that's an awful measure of who I can befriend or who I can get along with in the Capitol. But Ryan's been a really, really good example. No one will ever accuse him of being a rhino or of being, a soft conservative. He's not. But he gets along really well with the gay dude in the State House. By the way, I met with all of the closeted legislators for the most part, in Harrisburg. And you ever want to see somebody freak out? Have me walk into your office. Have me walk into your fancy office in the Capitol and be in the closet. And the thing is, I don't believe in outing at all. I don't want to apply shame to a situation that I feel very blessed by. I don't want one kid anywhere in the country thinking, oh man, that guy had to leave his job or he got condemned because he's gay. No. But I, like all of you, I hate hypocrisy. And so more often than not, what I will say is, listen, I don't care where you are at in your own personal journey on your sexuality. It's not for me to know. And if you're married or not, maybe you have an understanding with your spouse. I don't care. I really legitimately don't care. But if you vote against these bills, we're going to have a much louder conversation.
Right.
And I think that is a fair thing to say to somebody. Again, if you are statistically more likely to oppose these things out of your own internalized fear, you're not looking out for your constituents in a way that I'm looking out for your constituents. And so I have no problem kind of injecting that bit of fear in any of them.
Yay.
Right? Hoorah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Representative, I was going to ask you about Darryl Metcalf, but you seem to be all
Oh,
over him.
decaf.
So anyway,
I am.
but he didn't walk into Harrisburg. He was voted there,
Yes, he was.
and he's been voted a couple times.
This is his fourth term, 8 years.
Okay. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of getting out the vote?
Sure.
How low the voter turnout history has been in districts or whatever. Could you talk about that?
The question for those of you that didn't hear was the importance of voting, the importance of the electoral process in politics. I was at an event last night for one of the Democratic gubernatorial candidates, Allison Schwartz. And Allison, when she was a senator in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania enacted its domestic DOMA, was one of only 6 senators who stood up and said, absolutely not, this is ridiculous. And one of the things that occurred to me while I was listening to her speak is that if somebody asked me today, what's the fastest path to equality in Pennsylvania, or where could we best put our resources, I would say into the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania right now. We have the first chance in 80 years or so to unseat an incumbent governor, and right now there's nothing I can think of that would all 9 of the gubernatorial candidates, the Democratic gubernatorial candidates, just like all of the row officers in the last election, are all completely pro-equality. With Chairman Metcalf, he is from Butler County. Cranberry specifically. And he's not going to lose a primary challenge, and he really won't have a general challenge. It's pretty much an all Republican area. But just like with those 36 Democrats I was talking about earlier that voted for House Bill 818, it's not just about sending a Democrat, it's which ones we send. But the electoral politics right now are the single most important factor in where I go. There's a 20-plus vote lead in the House for Republicans. There's the Republicans control the Senate and they control the governor's office. That math no matter what, that math is never defeated by a great argument. No matter what, that math is never defeated by better ideology or better ideals. We couldn't get this governor to accept Medicaid, money that we already paid to the federal government that we want back, which will ensure 500,000 Pennsylvanians, put 40,000 more people to work, and put about $400 million in the budget. We can't even get him to do that. And it's because of the electoral math. It's not because we don't try hard enough, or we don't believe deep enough, or we don't have the right numbers. The single fastest, most important way to impact policy at the municipal level, the state level, and the federal level is through who we put in office. Period, period, period. There's just no way around that. And if right now you're in Pennsylvania and you're a supporter of equality, you've got a lot of really good candidates to choose from. There's a lot of out people running right now for office. This weekend, I'm going to be in New Hope doing an event for Lori Schreiber. I'm a huge supporter of Dalen Leach, who's running for Congress. Dalen has been the most pro-LGBT legislator in the last 10 years in Pennsylvania. Now we might have him as a congressman. Yeah. It's intense. Those things are more important than lobby days in Harrisburg. They're more important than emails to legislators. They're more important than fancy websites about issues, unfortunately, because I've done all of those things, and I still do. But nothing's more important than electing people that represent our better angels.
And I think that people need to understand that there aren't, we're not just talking about races that are for state house or for Congress or for president or for governor. We're also talking about school board elections. We're talking about local city council elections. In Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I'm from, we had a primary election between a very, very pro-gay, very supportive city councilman who was running for mayor as a Democrat in the Democratic primary, and a person who was just the quintessential, who was a Democrat, the quintessential most anti-minority, most anti-gay, most lying, despicable person there was. And that, and she was famous for. Well, you did it. For she was famous for creating that English-only law. She actually went to Congress to talk about that, and in that election, the guy that won, whose name was Marty Velasquez, won by one vote, 2,640 to 2,641 votes, and because of that, it changed because he won, and literally every single person that cast a vote for him cast the winning vote, because if he hadn't done that, or if they'd voted the other way, the other person would have won, and it would have been a terrible situation. But we also have circumstances where we have school board elections in small towns where people win by 35 votes, and that's it. That's the whole number of votes, and so people really need to understand that they have to vote in every single election. They have to be a super voter and vote in every primary and every regular election in November. And when you do that and you become a super voter, you become electoral gold. And when you send a letter to your state representative, they might look up whether or not you vote, which is a matter of public record. And if you never vote, who cares? But if you vote in every election, you're the one that gets that pile of mail stuffed through your little mail slot at every election. And they are doing that because you are going to go to the polls. You matter. And young people need to understand that the reason everybody always talks about Social Security in election is because old people vote and young people don't. And young people need to go out and vote in every single election. From now on, become a super voter and be a super voter in every single election twice a year for the rest of your life. So there you go.
We are out of time, unfortunately, but I wanted to give another round of applause to Liz Bradbury and Representative Brian Sims.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming and for talking to us about ABS rights, right?